attention-seeking behavior in a room full of people when you raise your voice, it's because you would like everybody to look at you and to listen to you.
Thank you. Oh, and there I am, loud. I want to begin this morning, the most prominent means the most thing that stood out the most to me this morning was the brightness of the sun. It's 93 million miles away, and in summer it can make us really sweat. It's still 93 million miles away, but I'm not sweating at all. Anybody here feeling the warmth of the sun? But it's good to see it up there in the sky. And I'm going to begin our service today. Well, I've already begun technically, but I'm going to carry on by lighting this light and asking, does anybody know what the word Epiphany means? Anybody have an idea of what Epiphany means? Anya, take a guess.
It's when the wise men come.
It's when the wise men come. And the word epiphany has a special meaning. It's sort of like, aha, I get it. An epiphany is an aha moment or an I get it moment. And I am hoping that today there might be an aha for you or an I get it. And I trust that if you open your hearts and minds, God will bless you.
Over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route.
Thank you, Anne. My life is beginning to feel a little bit like a music box. Or remember the old cuckoo clocks? The clock would strike the hour, bong, 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 and out would come a little farm maid with a pail of water, and she'd walk around the front of the clock and go in another little door, or sometimes a little man would come out. And I feel like my life has become a bit of a ritual. So here I am at this point where I stand up to look at you and to talk to you a little bit. And it seems like every week the pattern is the same, and still there's always something surprising that comes out of it. This has been a very rich week for me in terms of being a theological thinker. For some reason, the text got into me, and it was like yeast in a pot of dough. It just animated me and started to raise my spirits. And by about midweek, I said to Barbara, do you know what? Some Sundays I haven't got a clue what I'm going to say, but this Sunday I've got so much to say, I'm not going to have time to say nearly any of it. But I really was intrigued by the story of Herod. And a couple of years ago, I found this National Geographic magazine, and the cover story is about King Herod. And I'm delighted to read this because I learned things about Herod that I had never learned in Sunday school. So I'd like to suggest that when you are reading the Bible and trying to make sense of it, that you also read other things, current things, and try to hold the tension between what the Bible is talking about and what other things are talking about together, so that the conflict between them, or the resonance between them, the sameness or the difference between them, may help you gain insights. But what I didn't recognize is that Herod might have been there on the day that Julius Caesar was assassinated. Do you remember in Shakespeare, Et tu, Brutus? Julius Caesar was the ruler of the Roman Empire, and some folks had hatched a conspiracy to kill him. They wanted to get rid of him. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but after the assassination, the Roman Empire basically divided into two segments. One was under the rule of a man named Octavius, and one was under the rule of a man named Mark Antony. And if you wanted to write a soap opera, this is prime material. Because Mark Antony ended up marrying Cleopatra, and Cleopatra had been Octavius's lover. This stuff that goes on in these stories is interesting. But what happens is that Octavius and Mark Antony get into a conflict, and a civil war starts, and Octavius wins. So Mark Antony is killed. And Herod has been Mark Antony's right-hand man. Herod knows how to play the power game in a very effective way. And one of the first things that happens is when Octavius kills Mark Antony is Herod has to decide, what do I do now? And what he does, he goes up to Octavius and he says, Octavius, he says, you know how well I've served Mark Antony. You know that much of what Mark Antony accomplished, he couldn't have accomplished without me. And you may think that I'm a bit of a threat to you. I want to assure you I'm not. In exactly the same way that I served Mark Antony, I'll serve you. And there's a clue about who Herod is. Herod's not that particular on the shape of the power, but Herod is very interested in maintaining his relationship with the power. And as a result, he gets to be made king of Judea. And that's where many of our stories about Jesus take place, while Herod is the king. Now, Herod is not just a king, but he was a great king by historical standards. If you read the Bible, all you'll get is the idea is Herod was the king who wanted to murder all those babies because he couldn't find where Jesus was. So he thought, if I kill all the babies, I'm sure to get Jesus too. And we think that Herod is a real scoundrel. And that may or may not be the case. Some people contest that the Bible story simply isn't true. But Herod was the kind of fellow that when he married his wife, she had a brother. And one day his brother was doing something in public and he was making a good impression. He got a standing ovation. Herod figured, this guy's popular with the people. He might be a threat someday. What does he do? Kills him. And Herod regularly kills people who he thinks might get in his way. And we think, how is that possible? How could a great leader of a great nation in a great historical epoch be so cruel, so callous? Now, what I would like to suggest to you is that we find in King Herod, we find everywhere. That is to say, it's not rare, Herod's policy of killing these babies. Now, it's stated very blankly, plainly, Herod decided. But let's think about a few other examples in history. Barbara and I watched a documentary not so long ago about a lady who discovered that at a certain period of time, I think from about 1905 till about 1970, the British government was in a systematic manner taking children out of poor homes, out of broken homes, out of troubled homes, taking those children and saying that they were going to do good for them. But immediately after taking the children, they told the parents that the children died. And they told the children that their parents had died. And then they took the children and put them on boats. I forget how many thousands there were. 130,000 children were shipped on boats from Britain to Australia. And we learned later that not only to Australia, but also to Kenya and to Canada. Now the thing is, what happened to these children was horrid. They were, for the most part, treated like slaves. They were given no dignity. They were treated as if they were not people. And this was all the result of democratic, liberal, political determination. The same story can be told in Canada and just about anywhere else on the planet. Wherever there is a growing power which is gaining control over circumstances, that power begins to make decisions that are extremely questionable. How many thousands of First Nations children weren't treated as if they did not matter one little bit? And this was not because some criminal persons, some very abusive persons decided to do this cruel thing. This was government policy. It was supported by the people who elected those governments. It was supported by the churches who encouraged their congregations to pray for these governments. The point I would like to draw by letting you think a little bit about Herod and the abusive power that happens wherever power gets coordinated into a single point is that there is an alternative. There is another way. No matter where in history you will see the rise of power and its abuse, power seems to have a pattern that always favors those who serve it well and treats poorly those who do not serve it at all. But the story about the kings, the wise men coming from the Orient to see this child that is born, is important to us because it begins by the wise men going to the center of attention in that ancient world, Herod. He was the great king. Everybody in Jerusalem was celebrating how wonderful things were. I suspect that there was a day in which Herod built a great big seaport. It was a man-made seaport which made Jerusalem into a global trading partner with the Roman Empire and other empires. And I suspect that at the dedication of that seaport, that the priests in the temple who were supporting Herod read a text. And I imagine that the text they read was the one we heard today from Isaiah. So Herod has built all these magnificent palaces. The second temple is greater than the first temple. He's built sports complexes. He's built fortresses. All with slave labor, by the way, and by taxation. But he's great. And the wise men do not stop there, but they move on to the baby Jesus. And when they get to the baby Jesus, the Spirit tells them not to go back to Herod and report what they have found, but to go home by another way. And that's the key phrase for me, that another way. We all come to life from a certain perspective. A Hindu person comes from a Hindu perspective. A Jewish person comes from a Jewish perspective. A Muslim person comes from a Muslim perspective. A Christian person comes from a Christian perspective. But when we encounter Jesus, that historic tendency in us is changed. And we go away from the meeting with Jesus by another way. Now, we are in the first place human
beings. Whether we are on the right hand or on the left hand, whether we are up or whether we are down, each and every one of us is a human being. And this is the great hope towards which we dedicate our energies, our resources, and our time. The hope that we will all recognize that the things that divide us are not very important at all. More often than not, they serve the interest of power, which is intent not on serving us, but exploiting us. And not just us, but people everywhere. So what I'd like to propose to you that in the season of Epiphany, we have an opportunity to consider our priorities, to consider the world in which we live, to think about how things are going, and to ask, where do I stand in the middle of all of this? There's a text in the prophet Joel which says, multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. This is a poetic image about a people trying to figure out what to do next. And this also, Joel's text, is an apocalyptic text. It's about a great battle between the power of dark and the power of light. I want to assure you, on the basis of everything I've ever read, everything I've studied, everything people have taught me, is that the great problem of our world is the problem of power misused and abused for self-serving reasons. And what our opportunity is to step out of that game and begin to play another game. And Gay mentioned that I was singing When Hands Reach Out Across Divides at the food bank. That's the kind of game we're being invited to play. To be volunteers in such things. To be volunteers in helping people just get something for their tables, whether they deserve it or not, because we simply don't know. But watching there on Wednesday in that volunteer capacity, what I noticed was volunteers and people coming in for food and little bits of eye contact, little bits of smiling, kind words, chatting with children, chatting with moms. I had one lovely little experience which was quite telling to me. It was a mom with a baby in a little carriage. The baby was 2 months old. Abigail was her name. And Mom had lots of stuff, and she said, I think I'm going to go put the baby in the car and then come back and get my groceries. And I said, you know what? Why don't you leave the baby here with me rather than alone in the car? You put the groceries in the car and then come back and get the baby. And she was nervous. She was worried. And she said, can I trust you? I said, I think you can, and there's lots of people here who are very trustworthy. But it was an amazing moment to me where this young mom decided that she would let her baby, who was so dear to her, into the care of a stranger. And that goes on at the food bank. It also goes on at Eden East, the health place. It goes on with all of our local charities that we have here in Envision. When the Envision people come into the back of our church, there's lots of conversation. Should they pay rent or shouldn't they pay rent? That's not the important conversation. The important conversation is that we are now helping people to gain their sense of self-esteem. When a poor person comes into the company of a person with affluence, they feel shy, reserved, unworthy perhaps. But when such a person greets them in a friendly way, with a smile, with a kind word, with a helping deed, things shift. So I would like you to know that I believe that we as a congregation are well on the way to living along that other way that the wise men point us to. And I think we can go even farther. I think we can do more. I can see a time in the future where this building and this whole little area becomes a place of health and healing for all kinds of people who the system leaves out. And if you're paying attention, you will notice that the powers that rule are increasingly cutting people out at the bottom. It's very, very simple. A decision is made in an office somewhere, corporate headquarters. Interest rates are raised 0.75%. Seems like nothing to us because we've got pretty good means. But there are families all over Canada who, because of that 0.75%, stand in risk of losing their homes. We think Herod was a villain. Why do we accept social policy which is so discriminatory, so abusive of so many people, and shows favor to so few? We're somewhere in the middle. Today, it's Epiphany. I hope the light will come on for you, and that you will make a decision to be on the side of God, and God is on the side of those who are most wounded, most broken, and most oppressed by the powers that spoil the earth. These are hard things to hear, but it's a new year and we want to make some resolutions. We want to set our goals. We want to set our sights. I trust that we will keep working together to make a difference here, in our neighborhood, in our community, and in our world. In that way, we will let the light of God shine. Not by fancy theological phrases, not by perfectly correct doctrinal assertions, but by the simple acts of human kindness where they are most needed. May God help you come to that place. Take your finger out once in a while and remember that's what you want to do. Let your light shine. May grace and peace be with you in the name of our Creator, our Redeemer, and our Sustainer, God through Jesus Christ. Amen. And would you greet one another peacefully? And we have some treats at such as the CE building. Please join us.